don't you just chill out?
Tip number 3, start small and then build on top of it. When many people decide to finally break their bad habits, it's usually in a burst of 3 a.m. motivation where they're thinking something like, man, my life is falling apart and I need to build it right back up from absolutely nothing whatsoever. And so let me just start by going from 0 right to 100. And this is also very common with New Year's resolutions, as people think, okay, well, I have eaten nothing but junk food, McDonald's every single day for the last year, and I don't even know what a gym looks like. But I'm going to start going to the gym 7 days a week for 5 hours a day, right as soon as January 1st hits. And guess what they don't do? The reason why they don't do that is because they've given themselves way too much, way too fast. It's a good thing to have motivation and to have ambition, but it's important to remember that Rome was not built in a day, and that it's really, really not easy to start straight at 100. To take an example, if you're running, just in real life, just going for a sprint, do you start at your maximum sprint speed? No. You have to run and you slowly gain speed till you reach your maximum speed. Same with driving a car. It doesn't start at 100 kilometers an hour. It starts at 0 and it slowly goes up. Maybe not necessarily slowly, but gradually goes up. For building your own habits, and sometimes even replacing or breaking your old habits, it's good to start slowly and gradually become better. You see, take for example the New Year's resolution that I listed earlier, which was to go to the gym 7 days a week. Well, 7 days is probably too much for someone who just got to the gym. So, start small. Say you'll go to the gym an hour every single time that you go. Say once a week on weekends or 3 times a week, depending on how much you think you can handle, depending on where you're starting. If you're starting from a background of at least doing some type of sport or physical activity, or if you're starting from absolutely nothing at all. This way, you're not going to get overwhelmed. You have a habit, and you can build around it fairly easily as it's scheduled. So you can build yourself a calendar or figure out, how am I going to build my life around this so that, it's not too much, too crowded. I can still find things to do. I can still put other things into my schedule. I can still work on school or my job or whatever it is I'm doing. But you're also not finding yourself not doing it because you're not going. Like, it's an hour a week or 3 hours a week. Can't be that much commitment, You could also start with the once a week, and then after, say, 3 weeks, start going twice a week, and then add in another day, till eventually you find yourself going most days of the week, but still leaving yourself a couple rest days. This is a pretty good strategy for New Year's resolutions, simply for the fact that it allows you to stay committed, as the commitment isn't 0 to 100. You're starting with a simple base to build off of, and then you start building your tower. You build the tower from the foundation up. Or let's say that you're trying to break a bad habit. Say you're trying to break a bad habit of procrastination. Well, this was actually something I did along with my brother years ago, back in the pandemic. And it was because schools back then would assign work. All the work that you would have during the week would be assigned on one day at the start of the week, so Monday. And then from there, they had a due date, say Friday or Saturday, and they wanted you to finish everything by then. And so there was a couple ways that each person could choose to handle it, and one of the most popular ways was to simply not work on it at all, actually point, or to not work on it at all till the very last day and then rush everything at once, which can be a little stressful and is definitely not optimal for quality because quality takes time. But it was common. However, what me and my brother decided to do, or my brother and I decided to do, is to do the opposite of what we've been doing for years at that point, pretty much all our lives, and to instead give ourselves a challenge, which was that instead of waiting till the last day, what if we tried to get everything done as soon as possible? So, since the last day was Friday, we said, okay, well, let's get everything done by Thursday. And so we planned our days, saying we would do this day, and then the next day we would do this and that. This way, we could still have fun. However, we also challenged ourselves otherwise. We made it so that we wouldn't play any games, no video games, until after we finished all of our work. So that meant we would go outside to have fun during our breaks. But there wouldn't be any playing Star Wars Battlefront, which was the main thing we played back then, or Pokemon. So we would have to put both of those off until we got everything done. Which, since we're also, another great tip, operating in a group, we were more motivated because we had a reward and we had each other for support, which is something I'll get into with more detail later on. But it's something that I think you should keep in mind. So gradually we start to move the goalposts closer and closer. Instead of Thursday, it was Wednesday, and then eventually we moved it on to we'll get everything done the first day on the day it's assigned, so that then we can play video games and have as much free time as we want for the rest of the week. It would be like having a 6-day weekend. Eventually, by continuously doing this for the rest of the year, one, we start to grow much more confident as our grades improved, and we found ourselves working harder than ever before, but in a good way. And we also realized we have a lot more discipline because we pretty much taught ourselves how to stop procrastinating without anyone asking us to. For you, I recommend maybe doing something similar. Let's say your bad habit is procrastination. Well, you can use a framework similar to ours, depending on how your work is assigned, essentially prioritizing it and being like, okay, this is what's due that day, so let's work on this, try to get this done as soon as possible. Try to finish everything, say, 1 day or 2 days before the due date. Or if it's another habit, like, say, excessive social media use or even playing video games a little bit too much, then you could think about, okay, well, how can I curve this? Or how can I make this a reward is another way to look at it. I think especially with games, it's a good idea to make it a reward, as that's what we did. And so you can think to yourself, all right, I've got an average of 6 hours on my phone every day. Well, how can I reduce this? So you're like, okay, well, since I get 6 hours every day, how about tomorrow I allow myself 5 hours at most? Or for this week, I allow myself 5 hours a day at most. And so you keep going on with that, and you've hit a small, achievable goal. You see, as JFK, I think, said in the beginning, no, he said we need power. But as JFK sometimes says at the beginning of 5, is a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, which is actually a Confucius quote. In any case, it can seem really overwhelming to have to go from 6 hours to 0 hours in a single day. I mean, you just can't imagine it because you don't remember the last time you've gone 0 hours without using your phone, and going absolutely zero from having texted the entire day yesterday, yeah, that seems like a bit of a leap. So don't try to, jump the flagpole in Super Mario from the ground. If you want to jump over the flagpole, which is actually possible in the original Mario, well, you're not going to do it from an elevation of 0. You're going to want to find a way to get yourself the extra height to jump over. Here, you're building your framework to jump the flagpole. Instead of going straight from nothing at all, go, okay, now that I've done my 5-hour week, next week I'll do 4 hours. And the week after that, 3. And it'll take you, say, 6 weeks if your goal is 0, which for most people it isn't, and I don't think it needs to be. But let's say your goal is to bring it down to an hour a day. Well, eventually, with just 5 weeks, you'll be at an hour a day, which is a huge improvement. And it didn't take that long to achieve, but it was gradual enough that it still lets you slowly get into it and not feel overwhelmed. Tip number 4, if possible, operate as a group. Well, it is tempting to be the lone wolf, alpha male, sigma, or whatever, or to just try to do everything alone and I don't need help. Well, humans are social creatures. We simply work better as a team. We simply work better in groups, in pairs, in groups of 4, whatever the case, than we do alone. When you decide to go on your habit using exclusively motivation from yourself, you're probably going to run into a roadblock at one point. The roadblock will be that, well, I don't really feel like it today, so what if I just don't? Which is a huge trap, because you start to convince yourself with your own excuses. They start to feel believable. It starts to make sense in your mind. It's like, I can just miss a day, it won't be much. But by deciding that you're not going to work today, you've brought yourself to a point where you're able to rationalize it as to why you don't really need to be doing this, when you kind of do. Or maybe you start to rationalize, everyone does this once in a while. Everyone else doom scrolls. And so it's like, you're not getting better because you rationalize it, which is something that just happens when we're working completely alone and we have to manage ourselves. So operate in a group with a friend, in pairs, or whatever. Let's say both you and your friend have been thinking that you want to have higher grades. Well, then you and your friend can arrange a plan to work together, so you guys study together or help each other out with homework and things like that, but also motivate each other to study. One, by making studying more engaging because you're doing it together, as I said earlier, or because when one of you is like, man, I really don't want to do this today, the other is like, but you've got to. We're in this together. You can't just quit. And the bigger the group can sometimes be, the better, because when you have several people on your back and you're starting to think, okay, I can't do this today, well, how are you going to tell 4 other people who all have the idea that we're in this as a team, that we're not laying each other down, that we're not giving up? You're going to have to fulfill your promise to those 4 other people. Because it's easy to break promises to ourselves, but Breaking promises to others, especially multiple others, that's a little bit dicier. Tip number 5, and this ties into something that I've actually mentioned twice already, and it's to have a plan. Your plan does not need to be extremely elaborate. You don't need to do all that E equals MC2 and have this board like Big Bang Theory and, come up with this super extreme scientific method on how you're going to solve this. But having a general plan that you can stick to means it's easier to follow through with that. I mentioned it in the example that I gave earlier of working with a partner and to schedule events. Say, for example, as I've mentioned a couple of times earlier in the video with the gym, have a general plan where that plan is how you'll gradually add on to it, which days you're going to go, as planning which days means that you have to hold yourself accountable. Because if you're like, I'll go 3 days a week, but any 3 days, well, it's not very strict. It's not something you have to adhere to as much. So you might be like, not today. And then there's only 3 days left in the week, and you're like, well, I'm not doing 3 days back to back. So you did not follow through with your habit. But if you say Monday, Tuesday, Friday, well, those 3 days are set in stone, and you must work on those 3 days. Your plan could also include more than just what days you'll do and who you'll work with. It can be a contingency plan. Yeah, like the Modern Warfare 2 level. For example, as I said earlier, you know that at one point, it's kind of inevitable that you will fail. You'll make a mistake. Your scheduling won't work, whatever the case. So have a plan on what you will do if you fail. Say, for example, you procrastinate and you miss one day. Well, how are you going to hold yourself accountable twice as hard the next day to ensure that you stay dedicated? How you'll make sure that you won't snowball, that you won't slip back into the same habit, because it is a slippery slope where, if you miss a day, it is a lot easier to rationalize mixing the next few days. Which is why you need to hold yourself extra accountable to think on how you can do this without snowballing. Your plan could also be, if you can't make it to the gym one day, a workout that you'll do at home. Or if you fall back into your weird internet habits, you'll do a plank equivalent to the amount of time that you spent engaging in this weird habit. Or for each minute that you spend on your phone that you shouldn't be, each minute that you're doom scrolling, you do an equivalent plank. One, you'll build discipline because you are not punishing yourself, not beating yourself up. You're doing something that's good for you, but doing something that's difficult, which makes it so that it reinforces the fact that you shouldn't have done this. And 2, it adds a silver lining. You didn't fail completely. You didn't give up and throw everything away. You got right back on it after your failure. You stood right back up. Like in Call of Duty Zombies, for example, you get downed, you get revived, or revive yourself with quick revive. Or in Smash Bros, you get knocked down while you try to recover as quick as you can. A bonus of using that specific habit is that you'll grow stronger each time you fail, so it's another silver lining. You might be messing up, but you're not doing nothing. You are getting some physical exercise in.
Negotiations, one piece at a time. Don't lose an arm on my account. dead and the White House.